You already know about the cadaver synod. A pope, a corpse, a trial, a verdict. You probably assumed that was the low point. It was not even close. For nearly a century, the most powerful institution on Earth was run by a rotating cast of murderers, teenagers, and men who would shortly become corpses themselves. Historians looked at this period, considered their options, and named it the Pornocracy. We will explain that in a moment. Rome, 9th century. The papacy was not yet the orderly institution it would eventually become. It was a political office, the most powerful political office in the Western world. Kings required papal approval. Wars were blessed or condemned from this city. Excommunication didn't just threaten your soul, it ended your career, which meant that whoever controlled the papacy controlled everything. The Roman noble families understood this completely. One family understood it better than the rest. The Theophylacts were a Roman aristocratic family with money, military connections, and an appetite for institutional control that would, in retrospect, seem excessive. They did not want to be pope, they wanted to pick the pope. There is an important difference. They were aware of it. The Theophylact family was led, in practice, by Theodora. Her husband Theophylact held the military titles. Theodora held everything else. She managed correspondence. She managed alliances. She managed, when necessary, the selection of the Bishop of Rome. This was not her official role. She did not have an official role. She did not need one. There was a bishop she was fond of. His name was John. He was competent. He was well-connected. He was, by the standards of the era, relatively stable. Theodora decided he should be closer to Rome. She had him made Pope John X. This was considered normal. John X would reign for 14 years. He led armies. He stabilized the region. By most measures, he was a capable pope. Theodora died before she could see what happened to him. Her daughter did not have the same restraint. Her name was Marozia. She was 15 years old. She was already paying attention. Pope Sergius III took office in 904 AD. He had arranged for his two predecessors to be murdered. This is not disputed. Shortly after taking office, he began a relationship with a Marozia. She was 15. He was in his 50s. The church has since described this as an alliance. We will move on. Sergius died in 911. Marozia was in her early 20s. She married a Roman military commander. He died. She married again. He died. She accumulated titles with each marriage. She accumulated power with each death. None of this appeared to slow her down. By her 30s, Marozia controlled more of Rome than anyone with an official title. Pope John X, her mother's pope, had become inconvenient. She had him arrested. He was smothered in prison shortly after. Historians describe the exact circumstances as unclear. The general circumstances are not unclear at all. In 931, Marozia installed her son as pope. Pope John XI was approximately 21 years old. His father was almost certainly Sergius III. Marozia had now outlasted 4 popes, 2 husbands, and 1 mother. She was just getting started. Marozia's third marriage was to Hugh of Arles, King of Italy. It was, by the standards of her previous marriages, an ambitious choice. The wedding was held at Castel Sant'Angelo. The guest list was considerable. One of the guests was her son, the Pope. Another guest was her other son, Alberic. Alberic had opinions about the marriage. Specifically, Alberic objected to Hugh's behavior at the wedding feast. The exact nature of the offense varies by source. One account suggests Hugh struck Alberic across the face. Whatever happened, Alberic left the feast, went directly into the streets of Rome, and told anyone who would listen that their city was being handed to a foreign king. Rome listened. Hugh fled the city. Alberic seized control of Rome. And Marozia, who had spent 30 years accumulating power through patience, calculation, and the careful management of powerful men, was arrested by her own son. She was thrown in prison in the same fortress where her wedding had taken place 3 days earlier. She would never leave. Pope John XI, her son, her appointment, her pope, was stripped of any real authority by Albrecht and reduced to ceremonial functions. He died in custody 3 years later. Marozia outlived him by decades, alone in a cell in Castel Sant'Angelo. History does not record her final years in any detail. It rarely does. Albrecht ruled Rome for the next 20 years. Before he died, he extracted a promise from the Roman nobility. His son would be the next pope. His son was a teenager. This was noted and then accepted. In 955, Albrecht's son became Pope John XII. He was 18 years old. He was the grandson of Marozia. The Theophylact family had, across 3 generations, produced the mother, son, and grandson of popes. Marozia would have appreciated this. She was still in prison. John XII is one of the more comprehensively documented popes of the era. Contemporary accounts describe a man who treated the papacy as a personal entertainment budget. He was accused of ordaining a deacon in a stable, of conducting church business while drunk. He was accused of turning the Lateran Palace into something the Bishop of Cremona later described in writing as a brothel. The Bishop of Cremona was not known for exaggeration. He was pope for 8 years. Nobody stopped him for 8 years. In 961, Otto I, King of Germany and soon-to-be Holy Roman Emperor, looked at Rome and made a decision. He marched south with an army. John XII had actually invited him. He needed military help against a rival. Otto arrived, handled the rival, and then kept going. He looked at the papacy, looked at John XII, and decided that the current arrangement was insufficient. John XII was deposed in 963 AD. He was replaced with a pope of Otto's choosing. The Roman noble families, who had spent a century installing and removing popes at will, were informed that this was no longer their function. One form of control had replaced another. The Pornocracy was over. Otto would later be remembered as a stabilizing force in European history. John XII died the following year under circumstances that contemporaries described as compromising. Historians have been arguing about the details ever since. They agree on very little except that it was not dignified. The Pornocracy lasted roughly 90 years. In that time, the papacy cycled through more than a dozen popes. Several were murdered. Several died in custody. One died under circumstances his contemporaries refused to write down in full. The Catholic Church has since described this period as one of difficulty. This is accurate in the way that describing a building collapse as structural inconvenience is accurate. The term pornocracy was coined centuries later by historians attempting to describe what they were reading. It comes from the Greek. It means, approximately, the rule of prostitutes. It was not intended as a compliment to Theodora and Marozia. Whether 2 women who ran the most powerful institution in the Western world through patience, calculation, and generational political strategy deserve that particular framing is a question historians continue to argue about. The argument itself says something. We will leave it there. Pope Stephen VI, who started this conversation, was strangled in prison within a year of the Cadaver Synod. His successor lasted 4 months. The one after that, less than 2. Nobody learned anything. The church kept going. It always does. This has been Unhinged History. Everything you just heard is real. We checked. The fingers are still missing.